Hi, and welcome to Coffee Talks with Jac, with me, your host, Jac of Jac Frost Is Real on TikTok. Today, we are going to discuss my new favorite thing in the entire universe, or at least my new favorite obsession for the next 2 weeks, because that's usually about how long my obsessions are. And that is the new Ernest Hemingway fan fiction that I could just crawl into and be happy for the rest of my life. Please hear me out because I'd like to make it really clear that I am not someone who openly reads Ernest Hemingway anything. I mock him. I literally once went on a date with a guy, and you know that like trend on TikTok, how to lose a guy in 10 days, and you just tell like stories of how you've lost men in the past. I literally lost a guy because I told him that my friend would think he was pretentious for having Ernest Hemingway be his favorite author. Heard from him again after that, but it took months, and it was only because he just couldn't get me out of his head because I'm so original. Ironically, that guy also told me that he thought I should have a podcast. So, like, Kyle, if you're listening, I did what you said I should do. How are you and your stupid photography career? How's it going? Anyways, not the point, not the point. People have been telling me I should have a podcast forever, including but not limited to my big sister Sammy. So right now I'm going to go into the podcastiness of the episode. So first and foremost, I am Jac Frost. My parents are terrible people. I don't discuss the coming of my name very often or how I came into my name. I was born with it. But that being said, um, the Ernest Hemingway fan fiction that I'm obsessed with is the new spinoff of the show Yellowstone 1923. I would first like to clarify that I have never seen the show 1883, which is another Yellowstone spinoff. So when I'm mentioning anything that Taylor Sheridan has written, via Yellowstone or in the Yellowstone universe, I am not talking about 1883. I do not know anything about 1883 except that Faith Hill and Tim McGraw are in it playing a married couple, and that Sam, what's his name, who's also in the movie Roadhouse, is also in it with the fabulous mustache. But besides that, I know nothing about this, and that's perfectly okay because I have really no interest in seeing Faith Hill and Tim McGraw live in the 1800s. I didn't even know if I was going to have interest in Helen Mirren and Harrison Ford living in the 1920s, but I really wanted to try it. Because if I'm going to be interested in anyone doing anything ever, it's Han Solo and Queen Elizabeth. You know, you get me? You understand? Anyways, let's continue forward. So, I'm not going to immediately get into how this entire show is actually an Ernest Hemingway fan fiction. I'm first just going to discuss like what got me into it and why I decided to keep going after I thought I was getting the TV show ick. Are you ready? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, great. I'm also going to be treating this entire podcast like basically like I'm talking to a friend. So there's not going to be a lot of editing. There are going to be a lot of tangents. I'm sorry in advance. If you don't like it, I'm really not going to be offended. This is just how I'm going to be doing this. I am starting other podcasts with like friends this year. Like I'm making plans for them. But this is just one where when I don't want to like actually have a discussion with my friends or like when they're busy, because I always want to have discussions with my friends, but sometimes they're busy, those absolute bitches. And when that happens, I will come on here and I will start telling people about my obsessions. And this week's obsession is just 1923. So, the first episode of the show 1923 came out the weekend before Christmas. And I know this because I watched the first episode, went, wow, this is really good. And then on Sunday, when the second episode was going to be coming, I was like, I don't think that the second episode's going to come out today because it's fucking Christmas. And I don't think that they're going to release a TV show on Christmas because that's not usually how people do things, you know? Usually, like every channel in the world just shows what's it called? A Christmas Story. Um, but apparently, the second episode did come out that weekend, and then the third episode came out this last weekend. And I watched the second and third episode today. But when I watched the first episode, I wasn't sure if I was even going to be willing to continue for it. So, um, first and foremost, I really love the show Yellowstone. I think it's very interesting and very well written. I started watching it with my dad when we still had a good relationship and kind of kept going from there. But with this show, something that's interesting in Yellowstone is there are two main female characters, and then every now and then they'll introduce a new female character who either dies, which is very annoying, or is the living worst. There's no in between. So Yellowstone Oh, wait, no, there is an in between. There is an in between because my favorite little himbo, Jim, John, Jay, no, the stupid one who in Yellow, this, I think his name is Jimmy. Jimmy in Yellowstone is a himbo, even if he's not muscular or even all that attractive. He's like the Pete Davidson of Montana, in my opinion. Okay, I love him. But he dates a lot of women who I think are interesting and well-written female characters. So actually, Yellowstone, now that I'm thinking about it, does have actually a lot of different women. But when I'm like watching this show, they're not given a lot of plot lines. They don't get to be very interesting all the time, blah, 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 blah. It's usually Beth and Monica, and that's about it. But 1923 has actually already managed to make that different in a way that I didn't think it was going to. Um, so now I'm actually going into the concept of the women characters in this show, where I was actually going to talk about other things first, but that's fine. So with female characters in the show, again, I started watching because of Helen Mirren, and Helen Mirren can do anything. She's perfect. I am continuously distracted by the accents that she has for this character, but I'm mostly distracted by it because when I was watching the first episode, I was only half paying attention because I was like doing work at the same time. So when they were introducing these characters, they weren't showing each person. So they said that they were coming from like either Germany or Ireland. And Helen Mirren's the only one who has an accent, and it's like a really, really, really thick European accent, and I legitimately can't place it because I just haven't gone back to the first episode to figure out what the accent is. And she's doing a very good job with it because, again, it's Helen Mirren. She doesn't half-ass anything, you know? But I'm watching the show, and I'm like, didn't she come to America from Europe with her husband, Harrison Ford? Why doesn't he have an accent too? They're the same age. So it's like very distracting for me because every time she's on screen, I'm just like, why is she the only person in this show with a fucking accent? But no, man, I'm probably not supposed to swear on this. Are there rules about swearing on podcasts? Can I make my own rules? I don't know. I'm not doing any research on this beforehand. I'm just talking. But that being said, like she does a very amazing job with it, and I love her, and I think that her character is like very interestingly written because, again, have not watched 1883. This is the first mother character we actually get to see besides Monica or Beth Dutton's mother in Yellowstone. And Beth Dutton's mother in Yellowstone is actually the worst character that's ever been written on TV. I hate her. I was glad when she died, except for the trauma that happened to Beth because of it, which like was very upsetting to me, and it is still very upsetting to me. And I just wish that people in that stupid family would go to therapy because I just want Beth to understand that she deserves more. And I also want people in the show Yellowstone to understand that adoption is a legitimate thing and that they need to stop making it a plot line that because Jamie's adopted, he doesn't count in the family. And also Rip and Beth like adopting a kid in like this new season. Like they're not adopting him, but they are adopting him, but they're not adopting him because he can't be a member of the family. He already had parents. He can't have more parents. And I'm like, that's literally what adoption is. He had bad parents who weren't there for him because they were drug addicts and they couldn't be there for him. But Beth and Rick could be there for him if they would just say, hey, you're our kid now. Anyways, not the point. I'm sorry. I'm getting off track. I'm not going to apologize on this. I am not sorry. I'm getting off track and you guys should be enjoying this. um, okay, so moving forward, let's like the female characters in this show in 1923. It's very annoying that all of them are blondes, except for one character. There's an indigenous woman. I have not gotten her name. Like, well, there, I don't know how to put this. There is an indigenous woman, and one of the indigenous basically prisons that they used to do under the guise of it being a school for young, I'm putting quotation marks around this because this is just what they said in the show. Indian woman. Obviously, I'm not calling them Indian. They are indigenous people. They are indigenous women. But like to take away their heritage and everything that they believe in, forcing them into Catholicism or Christianity, which I hate, and it makes me very angry in every part of that episode. I wish I could skip it, but like this is something that actual woman had to go through. And I think it's very interesting that they're putting this character into the show. But there's this young woman um, who was indigenous at one of these, again, prison schools. And we're just watching her in the fight of her life, basically. And I think it's very interesting because I don't know how she's connecting to the rest of the Dutton family yet, but I'm obsessed with her. And every time that she punches out nuns, because that's what she does, like every episode, she punches out this one nun and gets into fights. I'm just like, yeah, you go, girl. But I'm also like very worried about her directly after because then the nuns like torture her. So she gets one punch in and then they like just keep beating her. It's terrifying. If you aren't good with violence against women, it's definitely not something that I recommend like watching on the show. I do support you skipping while trying to like get the gist of it. If but like the minute that violence starts happening, just like skip through. Which is something that I say with any show. If there's violence that's about to happen and you aren't good with violence, you can skip the violence. You don't have to watch it, you know? But this character is really interesting because we just don't know how she's going to be a part of the show yet. She's in North Dakota. Right now, I'm watching the show and her grandma's trying to like save her or get her home. And I'm like, I'm hoping she gets to go home. I'm hoping all those girls get to go home. And she's another female character where I'm watching this and I'm just going, wow, you're so interesting. And she's also the only non-blonde female character in this show that we have been introduced to, except Helen Mirren. But Helen Mirren has white hair because she is an older lady who doesn't have access to hair dye because it's the 1920s. So I actually refuse to even call her not blonde because, like, you know that when she was in her youth, her character was also supposed to be blonde because every character in this show so far that is a woman is blonde, except for the indigenous woman or the nuns, because we don't know what color the nuns' hair is because they're wearing the thingies on their heads, the bonnets. No, it's not bonnets. That's that. I'm sorry. That part I actually am apologizing for because habits. Is it? They're wearing the habit bonnet thing majiggies. Um, Anyways, so there are a lot more female characters in this show, and they're all very interesting in different ways, but I almost didn't watch this show like after the first episode because I thought that they were going to go for the same plot as Yellowstone did with like the pilot episode we get introduced to all the brothers and the siblings and then what happens? One of the brothers dies and then you have to bring these other people home so that the Duttons can keep fighting for the ranch and like that does still happen, like that is still the main plot of the show, but they wait a little bit longer for it to happen. So it doesn't happen in the first episode and I actually think that's a good thing. And also, they didn't choose a character that I even learned the name of in this show for that. Um, so, like, there are multiple Dutton brothers in this show being raised by their aunt and uncle, Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren, because their parents had been killed and they were still running the ranch. So the only two brothers whose names I know are Jack and Spencer, but then there had been this other brother whose name I just did not learn. Actually, he might have been the father of Jack. I don't really understand. Anyways, again, I like cared about this character so little. They showed him so little that I just never even bothered to learn his name. And now in the latest episode, spoiler alert, he's dead, but I can't even tell you who he is. So like, does it even count as me spoiling this for you? I don't know. um I'm adding a flag here, and if I decide to edit this at all, I will add a spoiler alert there, but I may not edit this at all. I might just add this onto my Spotify and go, here you go, guys, here's my first episode. But yeah, so Jack and Spencer are the two characters that I'm most interested in the entire show. Like, I barely even care about Harrison Ford in this show, which is saying something because it's Harrison Ford and I love him in everything. He's fucking Indiana Jones. He's fucking, Han Solo. I almost forgot his name for a hot second. Like, there are just so many movies that he is in that I love him in, and then there are so many movies that he is in that I'm just like, he's there. But he is in my favorite comfort movie that I watch for New Year's, Age of Adeline, which I will speak of on another day because today is not the day for me to talk about Age of Adeline. That deserves its own podcast. So, Jack is marrying this young woman played by Michelle Randolph, who is an actress that I know basically nothing about, except for the fact that I know who she is dating or who she used to date. She dates Greg Sulkin. Do you guys remember the hot werewolf from Wizards of Waverly Place? Yeah, him. She gets to date him, and they're like the most beautiful couple in Hollywood. There, I said it. I think Greg Sulkin is like probably the most beautiful human being alive. Like, I am in love with Henry Cavill. I want to marry Henry Cavill and Chris Evans. I want like Chris Evans to be my second husband and Henry Cavill to be my first husband, and I want to marry both of them. I want to have both their kids because I just think that we would produce really beautiful offspring because how could you not with those genes and my genes? But when I look at Greg Silkin, I don't want to produce his heirs or anything like that. I just want to look at him. And that's how I think Aphrodite felt about Adonis, or Adonis, however you pronounce it, Adonis, who is an immortal being, but not a deity from Greek mythology, who was just literally so beautiful that Aphrodite was like, I want this man to be an immortal so I can just look at him permanently. And Zeus was like, sure, you got it, bestie. So he just serves them drinks all the time. He's like the bearer of cups. And I think that that's what Greg Sulkin should be, because he's just so beautiful. Like, he's literally so chiseled in every way, shape, and form that I think we should just make him an immortal being. And he can be in Hallmark movies and stuff for the rest of his life. I think would be great. I love him. Again, just I think he's perfect. And also, I don't think he should be in Hallmark movies. I think he should be in comedy TV shows and things like that. Like, because he was in the Netflix show Pretty Smart with Emily Osment, and he just has really good comedic timing. I think he's like very, very talented. And I know that his acting in that show is good because the script wasn't always great. And Jake from State Farm was in that show, and Jake from State Farm cannot act for the life of him. There was not one piece of him in that show that I found believable, but I thought every single thing that Greg Sulkin did in that show was super believable. And they're both quite attractive, so I know it's not just because of his face, you know? Anyways, back to Greg Sulkin's girlfriend, Michelle Randolph, who is an actress who hasn't done quite a lot yet, but like what she has done has been, I literally don't know. I looked her up earlier and I like have already forgotten. I don't know anything about her except her name and who she's dated, and I feel really, really bad about that. But she is in this show. She plays the fiance of Jack Dutton. She's marrying into the family, and she's a very interesting character. I love her because she's like the first truly effeminate kind of female character that we have gotten to see, who isn't also simultaneously such a badass, you know? Like in Yellowstone, they show girly characters, but they also make them badass, like the barrel racers. The really pretty blonde barrel racer is so pretty. She's girly, but she's also super good with horses and all this jazz. This girl, Michelle Randolph's character, is a girly girl who grew up in Boston because her parents sent her off to a nice finishing school. And she basically just summered in Montana for most of her life and fell in love with one of the Dutton brothers. And then, now I'm getting into the Ernest Hemingway stuff 17 minutes in, but it's just chef's kiss perfect. Okay, so in 1923, the way that this is an Ernest Hemingway fan fiction, and no one can tell me otherwise, is that part of the show is set in Africa, okay? And hear me out. Why is this an Ernest Hemingway thing? What was Ernest Hemingway into? Drinking and hunting. Those were his two main loves. He was such a piece of garbage. Literally, when I think of Ernest Hemingway, I just think of that one story that he wrote, like where this woman's talking about white elephants and clouds to her boyfriend who's barely paying attention to her, and it turns out that the reason that they're like waiting for a train is because she's getting an abortion, because he's expecting her to get an abortion after they had sex. And I don't know, I hate Ernest Hemingway. But there's this one interesting story that he wrote that I also had to read because I was an English reader, so I read a decent amount of Ernest Hemingway in my day, even though I didn't want to. Okay, he was just there, and you have to read the greats, even though all the greats have a tendency to be men, if not just white men, you know, because they're the ones who have been given those opportunities and respected enough to be the greats. Whatever. I'm getting off track. So Ernest Hemingway wrote this one story about this wife. And it's not about the wife, she's just there. It's about this hunter who's taking this husband and wife on a tour of Africa for hunting and teaching them how to hunt and all that jazz. And while she is shooting and he's teaching the husband how to shoot, everything I believe is from the husband's point of view, and he's like getting increasingly jealous of his wife flirting with the hunter who's taking them around everywhere. Um, the wife ends up shooting the husband in the back of the head, or at least that's what's implied. And then the husband dies, and she gets to be with the hunter and get all of the husband's money because he's like loaded, which is why they were able to pay a hunter in Africa to do all this jazz, right? Right. So in I really thought that that was the exact storyline that we were going to get in the show 1923, but Taylor Sheridan, the creator of Yellowstone in 1923 and 1883 and all these other like cowboy mafia shows, made it different and made it more romantic and made me believe in love again, which is the only reason I'm willing to call this an Ernest Hemingway fan fiction with a smile on my face, because it's like It's like if Stephanie Meyer wrote an Ernest Hemingway fan fiction is the only way I can describe it. Or like, no, not even that. If someone wrote Twilight Edward Bella fan fiction or Jasper Alice fan fiction and set it in the middle of an Ernest Hemingway plot, okay? That's what this feels like. I'm so obsessed with it, okay? I love it so much. Okay, so the Dutton in question for this is named Spencer, and he was in the war, the Great War, World War One, and he just never went back home to America because he got really bad PTSD. He couldn't feel anymore, basically, unless he was hunting. So he started getting a job, um, I hate this, but basically killing livestock in the African safari for these rich white people to be able to go on African tours and enjoy themselves in Africa, which is just, white people sucking in all new sorts of ways for the 1920s time period. Oh, let's go kill a lion. Doesn't that sound so exciting? All that jazz. I hate this entire plot because you have to watch a lot of like really gorgeous animals die, and obviously you're not actually watching them die because they're not actually killing real animals, but it feels like they are because they have really good effects, and it just scares the crap out of me. So that's what he does. He works with um African natives, and they work together to hunt these creatures and make a decent profit, and they get to like travel together. And in the first episode, it hints to that Ernest Hemingway story, in my opinion, where this wife is like this hot blonde wife, because again, every female character in the show so far is fucking blonde, and it's just fucking annoying. Um, Nothing against blondes. I think blondes are absolutely gorgeous, but after a certain point, when they all have the same 1920s hairstyle, it's hard to tell the difference. Like, how are we supposed to tell which blonde is which? One has an accent and one doesn't. That's it? Are you kidding? Um, so this wife is flirting with Spencer while they're eating dinner before he goes on the hunt for this jaguar. And he's like barely paying attention to her, but that kind of happens in the Ernest Hemingway story too. The guy just decides that he wants to get laid, so he pays attention to the wife like post facto, right before bed. That's not what happens in this. Spencer completely ignores this woman. She goes to bed with her husband, all that jazz. And then, spoiler alert, like you can skip forward 10 seconds if you want to. But she gets mauled by the animal, and then another, like one of the hunters that is with Spencer, one of the African hunters, dies. And it's like really harrowing, but you get to see, like, of course these two are used as plot points. You get to see how the black man is treated after having been killed versus how the white man is kind of mourned. But Spencer, of course, mourns his friend, the black man, more, which I think is good, but it's still like it's not something that you should pat someone in the back for. But anyways, I'm getting off track. I didn't even think I was gonna like Spencer's character. I thought he was very annoying. And I was just like, an Ernest Hemingway type. Cool, great. I should skip forward on all his parts, but he was mildly attractive, um, and had really good facial hair. I'm not usually into facial hair, but apparently I'm into 1920s facial hair because that shit was hot. But like Spencer being like showing himself as a mildly good person who takes care of his friends and takes care of people was very attractive. So then he goes off to a bar to drink himself silly in Africa, once he's away from this party and has done his job and all that jazz, and he like threatens the life of the guy who got his friends killed. He goes and he drinks himself into not quite a coma. He's just very stoically drinking at the bar, and this gorgeous blonde English woman comes up to him and starts hitting on him with all her friends. Like they're all giggling together, asking him questions about like what type of livestock he hunts and all that jazz. And I'm just like, this is a very annoying scene. What are we doing here? Why is this happening? Is he about to like threaten one of these women? Please don't let him threaten one of the women. No, that's not what happens. So the woman who goes up to him, her name is Alexandria. Because of course it is. And she has a British accent, and I can't do a British accent very well, but she has one. I can do it pretty okay when I'm like trying, but I have to do a Hermione Granger quote first, and I'm not going to do that on this. And she's just asking about hunting and she's calling it really romantic. And he's like, it's not romantic, it's life or death, and it's all this stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And he's being kind of rude and off putting because he thinks that she's being kind of rude and off putting. And then they just have this like moment of eye contact, and he's like explaining what it's like to like have that moment between you and the animal, and you're not sure which of you is going to make it alive. And she's like, and you don't find that romantic? And I don't know how to explain it. It was so gorgeous and beautiful and hot and sexy, and I was just like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool, I get it." And then it turns out that she's engaged to this like very wealthy man who she's just not into, and he's possessive of her, but he ends up being nice, blah 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 blah. And they're getting married that weekend. And Spencer's leaving the next day to go hunt another animal. So what happens? What happens? So the next day, as Spencer's leaving, she has a bag packed and she's just chasing him down while he's driving away in this car, and he's like trying to talk her out of it, and she's like, do you not want me to go? And he's like, I didn't say that. And then it's just agreed that she's going, and it's like, you believe, I don't know how to explain how much I believe that these two are in love, but I believe it with every fiber of my being that they're in love, that everything's perfect, and it feels like a fan fiction. It feels like a Twilight fan fiction set in the 1920s. I don't know how to explain it more than that, but it does. That's what it feels like. And then in the latest episode, like, he's just asking if he can call her Alex instead of Alexandria. And he gets really awkward because he's a very grumpy, stoic guy who has PTSD, and he hasn't had to talk to a woman outside of like banging them in a while. So having this conversation with her isn't working, and it's grumpy sunshine at its finest. It is full grumpy sunshine because he's really grumpy and she's really sunshiny. He's just like, it's a long-winded way for I'm gonna stop doing accents because I'm not doing any of their accents right. But he's like, it's a long-winded way for me to ask if I can call you Alex. And she's like, okay, so I can't expect a proposal to be like not long-winded then. And he's like, what? And she's like, a proposal, like obviously I'm not expecting one because I just ran away with you yesterday. And then he proposes right then, right there. And she's like, I can't, it's so it's literally so romantic because she's not expecting anything from him. And he's like, no, I have decided you are it for me. And it's like, I don't know what drugs they were on in the writer's room to be able to make this magic happen, but can I have some of them? And can I live in that universe forever? Just the universe of those two being together. I want to be the chemicals in their brain while they kiss, you know? Like, do you get what I mean? I feel like you do. And it's just like everything that they do, you believe with every fiber of your being that they can't stop touching and they can't stop being together. And there was no choice in the matter of them being together. They found their one and are with that one for the rest of their lives. And I love every part of it. And now, of course, like stuff has happened, and Spencer's gonna have to go back to the Dutton Ranch, and we'll see how well Alexandria, the hot British girl, fends for herself on a farm rather than like being a posh girl just exploring. But I think it's gonna go really well, and I'm just so obsessed with this entire thing because I feel like we don't get to have stories like that very often anymore. Everyone's always trying to make it bigger, make it more, make it like I don't know, hotter, but by making it the version of hotter that the studios allow in Hollywood, they just hire more attractive people. And sometimes really attractive people don't have chemistry. Okay? Sometimes, I'm gonna repeat this again for the people in the back. Sometimes really hot people do not have chemistry. And I'm really, really sick of trying to pretend that they do. Like, I need them to do better chemistry tests for Hallmark movies. Or, like, I'm trying to think of other things where people just don't have chemistry that I can't think of right now. I'll think of this later and, like, kick myself. I'll make a list of all the, like, shows where people don't have chemistry, where they're trying to convince us that they do. Ooh, in Arrow. In the show Arrow, they try to convince us that Laurel is an option for Oliver, in spite of the fact that Laurel and Oliver basically no chemistry whatsoever. You know who Oliver has chemistry with? Every single other person in the show except for Laurel, but especially Felicity. And it's just like, why are you trying to make us even remotely believe that Laurel and Oliver ever could have been endgame when you introduced Felicity's episode 3? And the world changed, and the sky brightened, and Oliver's eyes stopped looking so dead all of the time. Like, it drives me wild, bonkers, insane when they do stuff like this. But 1923, the Yellowstone spinoff, hasn't done this to us yet. Everyone has chemistry. I mean, Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren could have a bit more chemistry, but I like to think that Harrison Ford saves all of his main chemistry for his real life wife, Ally McBeal, because he's married to Ally McBeal. Um, but it's just this entire scene. I'm gonna, like, the minute that I stop filming this podcast or recording this podcast or whatever, I am going to go and I'm going to watch these 3 episodes again, and I'm going to learn why Helen Mirren has that accent first and foremost. Because I know in the first 10 minutes of the show they explained it to us and then just never talked about it again. But I'm also just gonna watch Spencer grow in a 3 episode arc from guy who needs no one to guy who absolutely needs someone. Because, oh my god, I forgot to mention, he's literally like, they almost get killed by an elephant, and then they almost get killed by a herd of lions before they luckily get saved by others because their car had broken down, and it's like really terrifying and harrowing and awful, and you're really worried that one of them is going to die because this is the Taylor Sheridan Yellowstone show, and it's like, he likes to kill people. Like, he really does. Like, I would not be surprised if he killed someone every season. Like, it hasn't happened recently in Yellowstone, even though it should, because I really legitimately think that Jamie's character should be killed off because he doesn't do much for anything. Um, but that being said, like, Taylor Sheridan does a good job of at least making you believe that he's going to kill people. So I have been believing that he was going to kill one of these characters, especially since the first 3 episodes of the first season, pretty quickly, and he hasn't yet. Or he has now. People have died. I don't know if I said it, but like, there's a character whose name I just still haven't even learned, and he dies. And like, other people have been shot and wounded, and you're really terrified for everything and all that jazz. And they do a good job of foreshadowing stuff. And like, you really do have to watch certain plot lines of characters who are just very uninteresting, whose names I also haven't learned, um, because everything comes back full circle to bite people in the ass. So you have to pay attention to this show in every piece. But Spencer, who I love and who I just think is perfect, like, he and his now fiance Alex almost die, and she's like, I don't understand how this is something that makes you feel alive. And he's like, it made me feel. Like, it's not that I felt alive, it's just that it made me feel. And she's like, well, I don't ever want to feel that way again. And he's like, I don't ever want to feel that way again either, because I can't lose you. And he doesn't say the I can't lose you part, but it's very much implied that now he has something to live for, and she's the thing that he has to live for. And it's just so romantic, and it feels very Riften and Maxie and Under the Oak Tree, where Riften just lives and dies by Maxie, and Maxie kind of lives and dies by Riften, but she's trying to make her life bigger than Riften, and he doesn't understand that. And it's just like, oh, I can't wait to see where these two end up and go, because I don't believe that there will ever be a love triangle or anything with them. I just believe that this is going to be a Twilight fan fiction written in Ernest Hemingway's hand. I'm so excited. Anyways, thank you for tuning in to my first episode of Coffee Talks with Jac, where I drink a lot of coffee beforehand and then start talking. Today's episode was brought to you by the Hogwarts scarf that I am knitting. It is a Gryffindor scarf, and I am hoping that I will actually finish it before winter ends, because I started it last winter. Like, I started it a year ago, and I still haven't finished it because I just start other knitting projects every time because this one is taking such a long time because I want to make it such a fucking long scarf. And that's very frustrating. And also, to people with like ears who are kind of fragile or sensitive or whatever, I am sorry that I swear so much. But also, please get used to it, because again, this is just a train of thought show. You're going to be listening to me swearing a lot or talking in circles, because I am treating this like we're on the phone together. Welcome to the party, pal. And also, again, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, don't tell me that. Only good reviews, please, because my feelings get hurt easily. No, I'm kidding. Like, if there is advice for how to handle things, go ahead and tell me. But again, I'm probably not going to edit this very often. Anyways, I'm going to hang up now instead of just continuously talking for another 20 minutes about literally nothing except how I'm not going to edit these videos. Okay. I don't know how to end a podcast, but bye.